Order. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
At least you don't come back tomorrow.
Ms. Miller,
Present.
Ms. Hurst,
Present.
Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have this meeting, bring it to order, our Legislative and Contract Subcommittee meeting. We apologize that we're a little delayed starting. We did have back-to-back meetings on today, and we just got out of a much lengthier than we thought would be special meeting. And so here we are starting our meeting now officially, excuse me, at 6:39. And so our order of business is to go over voting item. We did our roll call, and the first item, superintendent, is to vote to present to full committee for a vote a resolution in support of Mass Promise to invest equitable public school funding for every child.
Thank you so much, Chair Monroe Naylor. This is simply a vote to for the subcommittee to review the resolution in support of Mass Promise to invest equitable public school funding for every child, making sure that Springfield basically gets their fair share of the money that would support the education of our students. There has been there is an impact to our budget based on charter schools and the deductions from Springfield Public Schools, based on the aid that the state gives us because of the charters. I believe this might be in draft form, but I do welcome Attorney Keefe. I know you've worked on this, to go ahead and share some insights, as well as Chief Roach to share any insights as how it might impact our budget.
Absolutely. So just so everyone's aware, a template of this resolution was provided to us by the Mass Promise to Invest. We took a look at it, we checked some of the language. The original template also addressed school choice funding, but and they provided all the actual financial data. I had confirmed the financial data with Mr. Roach, but from my understanding is that the school choice, we don't really want to touch the school choice funding. The focus for is Springfield's focus should be on the charter school reimbursement rate, and so that's what this addresses. This resolution would be sent to state representatives, and I believe the governor, as well as the MASC, present what our view is and our position. That we'd like to change the law and how the funding is, or how the schools are funded and reimbursed for the charter schools.
Thank you. I did bring this to Attorney Keefe's attention and to Chief Roach when we were approached by the Mass Promise to Invest individuals. They had a really good presentation that was provided to some of the legislators that oversee this particular area at the legislature level. One of the things that was very important for me was to make sure that we had correct information and that we were not just signing on to agree to a movement without making sure we understood how it reflected the needs of our community and what those numbers are for us. And so I appreciate Attorney Keefe for doing a deep dive, and also for Chief Roach working in alignment and also providing me with information when I was in that meeting to make sure that I was very clear with them, like, here's our stance, here are our needs, and here's what we want to focus on. We did also have conversations around special education and the reimbursements and allocations for that as well, but it wasn't part of this particular resolution. But I imagine that there will be forthcoming some conversation about how do we continue to push for equitable reimbursement for students that have exceptional needs as well.
May I ask a question, Mr. Naylor? Is there anything else attached to this bill? Like, is the Mass Promise a bill, or this is?
So
Yeah, so so is this just one piece of the bill, or is
this is not even
this is a
this is
resolution?
a resolution saying we're in support of basically bringing some type of bill forward. I have not seen an actual bill yet. We're still, I think the drafting of that is still going on. Though obviously there'll be some negotiations and some conversations within the legislature. But this is just a resolution saying, look, this issue needs to be addressed. We're asking the state reps and the governor to look at this issue because we need some more equitable funding here.
So I'm not opposed to this at all whatsoever. I think the only other thing that I would add is that I believe that Rep. Ash and Rep. Finn have slivers of Springfield.
in their
Yes.
districts.
Mhm.
So you may want to add them, because I don't know where their district lies or if there's any particular schools in their districts, but they do have slivers of
He's
Springfield.
got two wards and 6 Ash, so. he's
Yeah,
got
so you
some-
probably got Beal.
Beal,
Yeah, he probably has parts of Beal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can't remember where
Summer
Flynn
Avenue.
lies.
Wow,
Yeah,
We want to add Representative Flynn.
Brian Ash and Michael Finn.
good catch. They do have pieces.
That's really small parts, but they have it.
Well, I can add that and then we can attach that going forward to the full committee.
And you left out school choice, I'm assuming, because that issue isn't flushed out, plus it's not really good for us anyway.
That's not good.
I'd make the motion so moved that we recommend this to the full committee.
I will second that.
Thank you. A roll call vote?
Ms. Monroe Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes,
All right, for the sufficient vote, we are going to bring this matter to the full body for a vote on our next agenda with the full body, which hard to believe it'll be at the end of this. I think it's gonna be at the end of this month, because next week
Oh,
we
I'm
have our retiree recognition.
Yeah, I actually was gonna ask that. I'm sorry, Ms. Naylor. Thank you for bringing that up. So are we hoping to get this to them, like, as the legislatures in their own budget cycle, or we don't have sort of a time frame?
That's a good question.
That we could reach out to Mass Invest and
Yeah.
ask what the timeline is. I mean, I think they're still, I don't think it's, I'm not aware there's a bill on the floor or that it's being
Okay.
considered right now. This is more just kind of get the ball rolling.
Got it.
so if they haven't filed anything yet.
Yes, then it's fine.
Yeah, even if they may have filed some sort of bill, and we can look into that a little further, but there's nothing that, I don't think it's as pressing.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there be no other questions, we're gonna move on to the next item, which is an informational and discussion item, which is review of the school committee's remote participation policy. Superintendent?
Thank you so much, Chair Naylor. So this is an extension by Maura Healy. She signed an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures. And so they were set to expire, I believe, March 31st, 2025. But for a variety of reasons, she has extended it. And Attorney Keefe is here to share additional insights on this particular extension.
Absolutely, and everyone should have a copy of a memorandum of law that we provided. Kind of just going over through the background, outlining what the extensions are. But mainly the extensions, what the act extends are the exemptions that for remote participation by the school committee. The law states you don't have to have a physical quorum. The extension of the law, the extension of the exemptions, we don't have to have a physical quorum. We don't have to have the physical presence of the vice chair or the chair. And we also actually don't even have to have the physical meeting. The whole meeting could be remote as long as there's live access. Now that obviously our policy is a little more restrictive. And so I outlined just basically that we wanted to address those issues. We could do that a number of different ways, or we could simply do nothing. We are compliant with the law that is right now, and it's really up to the committee's discretion as to how we have much more flexibility now that the exemptions have been extended.
Thank you, Attorney.
It wasn't that long ago we reviewed our policy anyway, right?
We did, we reviewed it, Mr. Collins, last year and we changed it. But there were several requests by multiple school committee members to bring this back, so we brought it back for another review. And wanted to wait, based on Attorney Keefe's suggestion, to wait until after the governor had made her decision on the remote policy, and then we would be able to have another discussion at that time.
So I know, I'll just note, if I may.
Yes.
If the extensions did not go through, and the exemptions did not apply anymore, the current policy is pretty much verbatim what the regulations say. So we would be still compliant because there's more restrictive policy.
Right.
Thank you. Ms. Hurst?
So I was one of the individuals that asked for it to be brought back up, and mainly because I believe in a short amount, in like the last few months, we've had like 2, maybe 3 subcommittee meetings that have had to be rescheduled or had to be canceled, and as a result be rescheduled because we didn't have quorum at the subcommittees. And so while I completely get and understand the the criteria or the parameters that we put in place, in particular for the full committee meetings, I do think that we should, or maybe we don't have to now because the governor's ruling trumps ours.
No,
No,
No, it
No.
does not.
we.
ours trumps.
Ours
the
trumps
government- yeah,
hers.
Ours, so the law is kind of.
Let me use supersede and not trump. So, supersede.
So if I could just address that point. So I think there could have been an argument that happened, that the extension or the extension of the exemptions would supersede the policy. However, I think because the exemptions were originally put in place in 2020, and then the committee revised the policy, making it more restrictive than the exemption in 2023. The committee has made by putting that policy into place, has kind of set its prerogative and its position as to, who can attend remotely and how that's supposed to happen. So that's why my legal advice is that it doesn't supersede the policy. It's the law, that's kind of the baseline. And then the policy is on top of that. The policy is not violative of the law.
Got it.
It's just more restrictive.
Okay.
And so the committee now has the opportunity to remove those restrictions or not, and keep it as it is.
And so I think for me, I'm not taking away from the work that was done. Like, I get that there was a lot of work that went into it. We thought about it, we molded over, it went through subcommittee, it went to the full body. I think that things change, right? And they evolve, and we've had an opportunity to look at how it has worked. And perhaps there's an opportunity for us to rethink it. Maybe we don't change the full school committee one, but I do think that there is some value in relooking at the subcommittee one, because there's a domino or there's a ripple effect to when that subcommittee doesn't take place, to those items actually making it on to the full committee agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst.
And I'll just,
Attorney King?
in the same vein as the subcommittee piece, the executive session piece that we have, the policy right now is you can't attend remotely. That is allowed under the current law. The law allows you to do that. So if we remove that from the policy, members will be able to attend executive session remotely.
But the law says it's got to be in an environment that's secure.
Yes.
We don't have that.
Well, I mean,
Typically.
if it was, so the executive sessions that have been in the mayor's office, I think that would
Right.
apply. But the person who's attending remotely would have to also state at the beginning, and that is in the regulations as they are now, which are currently exempt. But the regulations state that you have to state in the beginning that no one else can hear it. It's a private and confidential at the beginning of the executive session.
Ms. Hurst?
Yeah, so I know that the executive session piece gets really tricky. And I know that's like a super sensitive subject, or it's a sensitive situation, right? And I get it. But all throughout the pandemic, we conducted executive sessions virtually. And most recently, we had to,
Tell us doing that.
during the pandemic.
Doing any executive sessions virtually
Oh, yes, we did.
We did.
Absolutely, we did.
Completely,
before we had a policy, or
when we were
When
completely.
we were completely remote, remember?
Before we could meet in person at all, we did have.
that was before we had a policy.
Yes.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to.
Right,
Right, but.
We developed our policy.
right.
Yes, and what I'm saying is though, it's not like we've never had an executive session remotely. But just the other day, we had two individuals from the subcommittee, two individuals from our committee who have conflicts of interest, and we had to cancel the executive session. So the next time that matter comes up, those two individuals are going to continue to have a conflict of interest. And so what does that mean if for some reason one of us is unable to be there? Like, we can't how do we keep prolonging the executive session that needs to happen? And typically executive sessions are, there's an important nature to them,
Mhm.
hence why they're an executive session. I just think we need to be thinking about access and like, I just think we need to be thinking about access and what the detriments might be to us not having the level of flexibility.
So I absolutely agree with you on the subcommittee I kind of think I agree with you on the executive sessions as well, especially considering the last two that we tried to have. And it wasn't that, I mean, Mr. Collins, you would have been available, but you were out of the area. So you would have been able to join via Zoom had we had that ability. We would have still been able to have that meeting if we didn't have that restriction. So, and I know even with the ZEP board, when we meet, if we have an executive session, we'll have those online, like they'll be on Zoom. And so I do think that there is something to be said about efficiency and giving us the ability to be flexible that we should definitely consider. I am gonna always stand on my ground and say that I don't agree that we should be fully flexible or as flexible for the full body meetings. I think when we expect people to be in attendance, we should absolutely be physically here as well, if any way possible. I know that with our executive sessions and with our subcommittees, we rarely have people from the public that show up.
Right.
So most of the time when people participate, they are participating through live stream remotely. So I don't feel as guilty that somebody might show up and we're not there, but I think for sure in a full body meeting, people are gonna show up to City Hall, people are gonna be there, and we should absolutely be there in a quorum. That's how I feel about it. Mr. Gonzalez, you're not a part of the subcommittee, but I welcome you to have a comment because I can see that you would like to share.
I've got a few comments that I stood back just for this one. My first piece that I'd like to address is the policy versus the law. Because I'm still fundamentally conflicted, Attorney Keefe, as it relates to this. And the reason that I'm fundamentally conflicted as it relates to this is because I can specifically recall when I chaired this very subcommittee that the then legal opinion was that it was the discretion of the body to elect whether or not to operate under the governor's more permissive regulation of the open meeting law or our own restrictive one. So I specifically remember getting an opinion on this. Now, what I'm hearing is that our policy reigns above the law, but who says that? Like, couldn't we have a committee member that says to us or to the chair, to a chair of any committee and show up on Zoom and say, no, to hell with our policy, the law states this and I want to participate this way.
So, let me say how I can phrase it. So if it was reversed, it wouldn't work. Like if the policy was less restrictive, but the law was more restrictive, the law would trump it. But the law is kind of the baseline. And then we're saying, and the law says you can adopt the a remote policy how you see fit, as long as there's no confliction, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's like you have the law is, so you don't have to you have you had like the Bill of Rights, or you have like you have the basic rights of let me rephrase that. That's not a good example. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you can have the policy be more restricted because the law allows the body to adopt its own policies. And the law, so we have a baseline saying, yeah, you can have a remote policy and you don't have to. The law comes from the regulations that the CMRs saying the CMRs right now says you have to have, or basically what the policy says. The law then that was recently passed, the act by the governor, says those regulations, specifically the three that I outlined in the memo, are exempt, but you're allowed to have more restrictive policies than what the law states. That's, I guess, how the simplest answer I can give you.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
thank you for that. I have two other points, but
Can
I see
I
Ms.
add
Hirsch
some
wants to-
clarification to that?
Sir,
Because that's why I asked the question that I asked, because I remember that. So our previous legal opinion that was rendered to us said the opposite. It said that the governor's order, yeah, because you know why? I remember that I was sick. No, I wasn't sick. LJ had COVID, Justin had COVID, and I wanted to come to the meeting. And I remember Attorney Phelps saying, you can participate via Zoom because the governor's order still stands. It hadn't expired as of yet, and we had already implemented our policy.
Even with our policy, you'd have been able to participate.
No, because there was more than just two people that were out.
mhm.
I don't recall that. I
Yeah,
do-
so that's why I asked too, was
Yeah.
like, so does the governor's order supersede our policy?
Okay.
But I guess you're saying no, but I just wanted to add that I remember when that happened. I remember specifically because Attorney Phelps was like trying to figure it out and she was like, okay, let me call you right back. Let me make sure that I know what the order said. Like, I remember her doing like a great deal of due diligence to be able to get back to me with an
I
answer.
mean, we certainly could have conflicting legal opinions, but I mean, from my research and from what we've looked at, it's, there's the law and the law says you're exempting regulations. This policy is almost verbatim, or not verbatim, but a lot like the regular CMRs that are out there now.
Mhm.
And the policy was adopted after the exemptions had taken place.
Mhm.
So our position, our legal opinion is that they're not really in conflict. It's just saying, here's the base level, that's the law. We're adding some extra requirements for the remote policy.
Last time we revised, our original one said one person can participate. We went up to two.
Yeah.
And I, for one, think our meetings are scheduled far enough in advance. There's a big difference between this discussion that we're having face to face and remote. And no matter what people say, it's not as good discussion. I think we were elected to do a job and we should be going to our meetings. I think there's a big difference when we participate in person.
And oh, sorry,
I
sorry.
want to acknowledge that
Yes,
Mr.
sorry.
Gonzalez was not finished with his point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Chair Monroe Naylor. I agree with the last speaker's sentiments, and I chaired when we put together the initial policy, when we made several edits, revisions to it. And after seeing it in practice, my position on this has changed. While I believe that, yes, us as elected officials, we have a duty, show up in person. Absolutely. My piece is everybody's elected and everybody's an adult. I don't think we as a committee need to put policies in place to police fellow elected officials. Let people make those decisions and let the voters hold them accountable. That's my stance on that. So I believe it needs to be less restrictive, having seen how we have conflicts and we added more people can now participate remote. And, I just think we need to get less restrictive with this. And then my third piece on this, Chair Naylor, is that to remove the chair's approval. I don't see why, I can't recall why we put it in there that you need to have the chair's approval. If you show up to the meeting and they call the roll and you're on Zoom, you just say present here. If you're physically present here, let's move on with the meeting. I didn't understand that piece because the way that I take this is we tried it. Personally, I see some issues with it. It just feels to me that we're trying to police people. Latonya, you got to be here. Chris, you got to be here. Denise, you got to be here. No, you're elected. I'm elected. We're all elected. You make a decision on how you're going to execute the functions of your job and let the voters hold you accountable. So those are kind of my 3 points. I wanted to ask on the policy versus the law piece. I think we need to get to a place of being less restrictive, let members police themselves. And again, to remove the chair's approval. I'm not a member of the committee. I just wanted to speak that into the minutes. Thank
I
you.
appreciate you
Susie,
doing that, Mr. Collins.
to the chairs, that was put in so that the chair would know people, we were limited to two,
Mhm.
so that there would always be that control. Okay, this person asked and that person asked, and they had one of the legitimate reasons. And so you wouldn't violate and end up with people on three. And that if the chair didn't know ahead of time, that could happen every meeting.
Right.
So that was the logic of putting the chair approving. Just,
Yeah.
If I may just say, part of the concern too with not having at least a notification go to the chair is that if we may not have quorum, and if we don't have quorum, then we can't meet. And we need to know that as much in advance as we can. I do think though that we have not been applying the policy. There were certain reasons that we had listed as to why folks may be present remotely. And I have seen a pattern where it's not been necessarily that those are the reasons why people are remote, that it's more, sometimes it's an inconvenience to be at a meeting and then folks choose to be remote. And so I do feel that if we're going to loosen the reins, that we have to be equitable in that. Currently, we have a requirement that the chair and or the vice chair be at the meetings. I don't think that is fair, that the chair and the vice chair are expected to physically be at every single meeting, but everybody else gets to make the choice whether or not they want to be at those meetings. If that's going to be a requirement as far as our remote policy, then that needs to be made clear for whomever decides that they're going to be the vice chair, so that they have notice, and also the chair should know that as well and have input, because he should know that right now, it's a he, because our mayor is our chair, that he would know that he's expected to be physically at every meeting. So there's those constraints. So I think part of the reason why I suggested, and I was not vice chair last year, that we have some of these constraints is because then it's unequitable. It's requiring certain people to have to physically show up, and then other people can, at their own desire or convenience, not be present. And yes, you could say voters can hold people accountable, but the reality is most of the time the voters don't usually know who's showing up or who's not. And that's not, I don't think, a fair assessment of whether or not people are doing a good job. That's just my feeling, my sentiment. Ms.
Can I-
Hurst.
Can I say a couple of things to what you just said? So I didn't realize that the vice chair is the chair and the vice chair are there.
Chair or. in the
Yeah, I
chair
thought it was the
capacity.
chair or the vice chair, right? So not both of them have to be here, there, right? And I don't think I'm saying anything wrong when I say what I'm about to say, because it's been pretty public. But our mayor is dealing with a chronic illness.
Mhm.
And so the idea that we wouldn't be thinking about the fact that life happens for people, and there needs to be a level of flexibility. I get having a chamber that's empty when kids are coming to speak and the public's coming to speak. I 100% agree with you that we should have a presence there. But there are things that do happen. The other thing is that I don't know if people aren't following these 5 things, but my definition of emergency and your definition of emergency and somebody else's definition of emergency could be really different,
Mhm.
right? So it's broad and general enough that people are able to make that decision for themselves. But I do think that at the very least, especially subcommittees, that we should amend that policy. And even our other governing body in the city council, does things remotely. It does subcommittees remotely. So it's not like it's unheard of. And I just, I think that people's lives have changed. You've said yourself, you are, a busy business owner. You have things happening. My kids are like, my job is requiring more and more travel. My role on MASC requires travel. And that doesn't mean I care any less about my duties to the school committee, but I need a level of flexibility. I'm just speaking for myself, and I'm just saying, I have to imagine that other people who, whether it's illness or family obligations or work obligations. So I feel strongly about the subcommittee piece. I completely understand about the full committee piece and really making sure that folks are present for that. And I also think that, we may want to look at the executive session, but I think we have to take into consideration that there's this evolving world that's happening. And, these seats of electoral politics were not created with certain situations in mind.
Thank you. Great. You all set, Ms.?
Yes, I'm done. I'm done for the night, actually.
Thank you, Chair. Ron Naylor. I just want to say, due to those points, and I heard the points on why we put the chair's approval, but if it was the desire of this subcommittee and the larger body to just do away with this policy and operate under the governor's guidance, there will be no concern there. Again, you call the meeting to order, people show up in person, some people remote, you just move it forward. And I know, based on what I see and the good faith that I have in all of you, that we will not have a chamber completely empty when we have folks there, just based on what I know from the colleagues that I've gotten to work with over the past couple of years, being that the concern. But I'll leave it at that. I do have to get going. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak on the matter. I did want to stay back for it. Have a good night, everyone.
I'd like to just address that one point, if you don't mind. We still have to have some type of policy that adopts remote participation. It can't just be, you can't just delete this, then there'd be no remote. You have to adopt a policy. So, we'd have to do something. There has to be a remote policy adopted by the.
Chair Naylor, copy and paste what the governor has.
That would.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
And that's temporary, so you'd be back at it
You'd be
again,
back at it in 20.
which is why we had our own policy. And I think I know you mentioned the council. I don't believe they're the kind of a deliberative body that we are. And I know that the meetings,
Chris.
kinds of things happen. So, I think we hold ourselves to a higher standard and we still should. I think remote participation gives us less of that deliberative. Clearly you're traveling a lot more because I've seen that, but you've got the ability and when you can be here, you're here.
Yeah,
And,
I
and
don't mind being here.
participating remotely has worked for you. And you are much more attentive to the meeting than most when on remote. Certainly better, more than any counselor ever has been.
Second time.
I watched those meetings.
But I think the other thing, I was about to call you counselor. Oh. The other thing though, Mr. Collins, is that the delay that it potentially caused. Like I saw what happened when it was like, we had to call a special meeting, like, and the flurry of what Mr. Vargas had to do to schedule us and get us because, you know, that subcommittee got canceled and then it couldn't be on the full agenda. And then we had to
Mhm.
figure out another time to have a special meeting to have it. And so for me, I'm thinking about like the ripple effects of what that is as folks get increasingly busy. I mean, we have some time, like we're wrapping up our meetings, we're getting ready to roll into graduation season, but I do think that it is definitely worth a look.
I would definitely be open to, testing the idea of the, subcommittees being able to have remote and not requiring, a chair like that, having that ability for us to have it fully remote or hybrid, if folks can attend in person. I definitely would want to not do it for the full committee meetings. I just think if we test it with the subcommittee meetings and we think that we like how it works and we feel that we're making progress, then maybe we can have another discussion in a year or so and say, why don't we try this for full committee? But for now, I don't want to touch the full committee. But I am open. Like I said, the public don't traditionally come to our subcommittee meetings. I think that it would probably make Trini's life a lot easier as well when it comes to scheduling meetings.
We would have to amend our policy anyway if
Yeah.
we're gonna do that.
Right.
The other aspect of it is in subcommittee meetings is when we have our best interaction with the superintendent and the staff. And I think that's an important piece of it, where they get to come and actually give all of the work that's gone on and I think we owe it to be there. That's my own personal opinion.
I think the other thing is that, you know, what I have seen, is that sometimes to your point, Mr. Collins, is that, you know, Dr. Denal, you might say like, this is one of those meetings that I really feel needs to be in person. And Trini can say to us, like, this is a meeting where, you know, the request is for it to be in person, right? Like it is something that is, you know, that you think really sort of speaks to that. I don't want to give an example of like what we might not need to see or do in person. Like maybe the resolution, right? Like
It's
maybe
very
it's the
difficult
resolution,
To walk
right?
that line, you know.
Right, but
Let me
like,
give an example, Mrs. Hurst, if I may. The last meeting when we got together for 5 minutes to go over the Redgate Farm field trip. We literally had to come together, break up the day to come together for a subcommittee just to vote on 2 field trips, right? For budget and finance on one of those subcommittees. I can't remember which one. But it was something that easily, if we would have just had the opportunity, subcommittee, to get online, we could have taken care of in 5 minutes and been done and over with. Whereas when we had the full conversation on the budget and the
Yeah.
subcommittee, like we had to have all people there. absolutely, I would not want to have that on a Zoom meeting. So I wonder, is that something that, I'm assuming, yes, that we could have some parameters in place where it gives flexibility for the superintendent to be able to request, or us, the subcommittee to request,
Or the chair.
based on the agenda, or the chair, or what have you, that we could request that folks be in attendance if we said that we were going to allow for folks to have a fully remote subcommittee.
Well, I mean, if we kept the language that says that the vice chair has to approve it, that could, and it just gives the vice chair or the chair more discretion as to when, whether or not you're going to approve that remote participation.
No, the chair of the subcommittee should be the one to, should be in conversation
We
with
can
the,
add that language as well. Yeah.
with the superintendent. Like, she would say, Denise,
Yeah,
this
the
is
chair-
curriculum and program, and I got, some real.
The chair of the subcommittee is the
things.
chair, so it's covered when you use the
Right.
chair.
Right.
It's just that, and I hear what you're saying. How do you define that? That's a difficult thing to define as to which meeting is one way or the other. It's a very difficult thing to define.
See, I don't
but-
think as much. Like, I would say, if I was chairing legislative and contracts, for example, and we're coming together to talk about voting on a resolution, I would say we could do that virtually. But if you're saying to me, it's legislative and contracts, and we're going to review our full policy on fundraising or PTO, then I would say, okay, Dr. Denal, do you want us to be in person? And she's like, yeah, we got quite a bit of material. There's people that are going to present. Then I would say, okay, then we'll ask Trinity to make it an in-person meeting.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that it's not, you could look at
Oh,
take, for example, when we're just accepting a grant. Typically, that's very routine. It's going to be difficult to codify in the policy. Because you've got to somehow give a definition as to how that call is made and when the call is made. That's,
can we say at the discretion of the chair of the subcommittee?
I mean, it's currently, that's how it is. I mean, I don't think, I'm not aware of a situation where the chair or the vice chairs have denied anyone's ability to remote, but it's.
no, I mean, the chair, what Denise is saying, that the chair could decide that a meeting is going to be completely virtual.
Sure, I mean, well, it's the same thing. I mean, that's within the chair's discretion to do that, with the way the language is right now.
If I
That
were,
makes-
Is
I don't think it is,
Let's see.
because you have to have two people in the room or you can't have the meeting.
Yeah, that's how it used to be.
That's how it is
I
now.
guess it would be, so, let me backtrack a little bit. So that, right now, you still have to have the approval to be remote, right? That's you have to notice.
Correct.
So that, right. So then I guess if you have to remove that physical form requirement for that to work, for her to allow that, to allow that person to participate role if there's less people there. Does that make sense?
so there's a possibility that we could have a quorum and not necessarily quorum physically. So I could be in the room as the chair and you could be remotely, and we could still have a meeting because there's two people in the meeting, even though one is physically here and one is remote. I don't think it discourages us from gathering in person if we wanted to do that, but I do think that it permits us.
But
that if
again,
we
that
don't
puts
have
all of
enough
it on the
people-
chair.
True.
Always.
Right now, the way it's, right now.
But even the way you just suggested, the chair's bound to the chair.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's.
But that's the thing, like for subcommittee, this is the part where I feel like, and this is why we're having a conversation, right? And not a vote, because we're not sure which way we want to go with this. But I do feel like if you decide that you're going to be the chair and you understand the parameters that we have in place, then that's one thing, right? What I don't like is switching up things in the middle of the street. That's what I don't like. So if we were to say, we were to change the policy and anybody could participate remotely except for the chair, I don't think that's okay. Right? Because especially for the full committee, because then we're basically saying to the mayor, every single time you got to be there. And oh, by the way, if you can't be there, then Latonia has to be there for this year. Now in the middle of the year, we're switching it up. And everybody else can be remote if they feel like it. I don't like that. But I think if the consensus of the body is we all want to take on what the governor said and we don't care, people show up however they show up, we're just going to have a meeting. That's a different conversation. But again, understanding the fact that we're in the middle of a year. So I don't like switching things up in the middle of the street. I just don't. But I do think that we should at least have an open mind as to whether or not this is working and if we should be open to, is there a better way to do it more efficiently? And maybe this is as efficient as it gets, and we keep it this way, at least for the rest of the year, and maybe there's a way to do it more efficient, which is why we're having the conversation to see, is there a leaning towards a certain direction? I mean, it sounds like Ms. Hurst is leaning towards, yes. Let's do the subcommittee remotely.
I feel, no. Let me be really clear. I am 100% in agreement with having as many people as possible in the full chambers for a full meeting. However, honoring that, it should not have to be both the chair and the vice chair. It could be one or over the other, because one of you have to preside. And I don't even know if we have a rule or a policy of like what happens if both of them are out.
We
Like,
don't.
right. So that's that. The second thing is that I do believe that it should be to the discretion of the chair of that particular subcommittee as to whether or not they want to hold that meeting virtually or in person. And it would just seem to me that they would be in consultation with the superintendent and Trini, like regarding what material is being covered. And for executive session, I mean, I'm open to that. I think what I would say that we really need to be thinking about is the ripple effects of not having a quorum, to having those meetings occur.
Executive session scares me because of security. And,
Mhm.
unless you're in a really secure room with secure Wi-Fi and everything, that part of it scares me. That's why I'm hesitant.
Mhm.
I do hear what you're saying about subcommittees, and maybe there's a way. Now, answer me this, if the agenda is made up for a subcommittee and it is distributed to the 3 members, and there is consensus, not voting, but they look at the agenda items and there's consensus of the committee, this could be handled virtually. That's not deliberation, because you're not talking about, well, you're
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. It-
Borderline deliberation.
it's
I think.
close
it's
to it,
close
but
to
it's-
it. And there's an argument. If there's a policy that says it's in that subcommittee chair's discretion to state in the agenda, when they set the agenda.
Yeah.
To say, this agenda item is going to be remote or it's not going to be remote. I think that we could definitely put in there
Mhm.
and do agenda by, or, subcommittee by, individual meeting by meeting. When we set the agenda, we can do that. That could also be a little more tricky if if you say, no, this has to be in person, and then the same issues pop up as far as quorum and.
well, if it has to be in person, you're back to who you gotta be in the room.
Exactly.
And one can still be remote.
Right.
Right?
You'd meet the quorum.
So
yeah.
it'd be whether there's complete remote or the policy is what you'd go back to, right?
Yes.
The chair could, what you're saying is maybe the chair of a subcommittee might have, maybe we meant to say they have the option to say, this can easily be done remote. I've looked at the agenda items. It can be done remote. Now, I would hope the chair would consult with the superintendent and any department head that's got something on there. Because I don't want to give them short shrift. They do a lot of work for the items that come on our agenda. And I think they should weigh in on it. So I think the chair should have consultation with staff
Mhm.
before that kind of a decision is made. But there's a good argument, I hear you, we've had a couple of times, not as many as I would have expected, however, but there have been a couple of times. I noticed the mayor, you're right, going through health, but he went and scheduled everything on days that we never
Right.
meet.
Mhm.
I mean, clearly there's an issue with the subcommittees. How do we want to do it? Takes a lot more discussion than what we're able to do tonight anyway.
Oh, might as well stay. We've been here this long.
I know, but it's.
Well, but I don't,
No, I didn't mean for you to keep going, Chris.
know. And it was a discussion item. We couldn't take a vote tonight anyway if we wanted to.
Can't, no.
So I think I guess thinking about language that we could have Attorney Keefe present to us for a vote in the future, it sounds to me like we're leaning on getting some language together that would permit us to be able to consider having subcommittee meetings remotely, contingent upon the request of the, or desire discretion, I don't know what word we would use, Attorney Keefe, of the chair of that subcommittee based on whatever the context would be. And I think in conversation with the superintendent makes sense. I think having some language that kind of clarifies that.
I mean, I think if we just took out the quorum, the physical quorum requirement for subcommittees,
Mhm.
and still keep in that the chair of that committee can grant or not grant that remote participation, would address that.
But we would have to make sure that
You're
it's
still gotta
the chair.
Well, when I say the quorum, that too, that part, that's in the same, it's the same section of the policy right now. So we take out the quorum, the physical quorum requirement and the physical presence of either the chair of the committee.
Wouldn't it be more simple that you could declare a meeting to be totally virtual? That the chair rather than change all that, you started getting to quorum stuff, it's,
Well, basically, I'm taking that quorum requirement out is kind of what I'm saying. We could add a line saying the subcommittees are not subject to the requirement that they have a physical quorum, or that basically it's just saying it's except, we could do look at except for subcommittees. Subcommittees would not have to have a physical quorum requirement, would also not have the physical presence of the chair of that committee as well. So basically just taking out section 1 of the policy now for subcommittees.
Right. Yeah, so we can get that updated in language that reflects what you just said. And then we would be able to circle back in our future subcommittee, and then we would be able to have this as an item that we could bring forth to the committee, hopefully before our last meeting in June.
I don't think we need to rush into it anyway, but,
Yeah.
And we don't want a lot on that last June agenda.
yeah. So
You know, we want.
I think we would end up wanting to have the discretion, the chair in consultation with the superintendent and staff has the discretion to declare a subcommittee meeting will be held virtually. Entirely virtual,
So, sorry, so the chair and the constitution, the superintendent and who?
and staff,
Oh, meaning like,
the people who like you, like the people whose agenda items you wanna,
sure,
know.
okay.
I also do think though, we usually get like a flurry of requests in August, like right as we're heading into our very first school committee meeting. Yeah, so maybe, I mean, we don't have to rush into it, but we do get a flurry of requests during that last week in August and people are scrambling and so.
But we certainly want to indicate, even whatever change we're gonna do, that this is intended for more routine items.
How do you define routine items?
Can't, I think you leave it to the discretion of the chair in consultation with the superintendent.
Accepting a grant is routine.
Sure. But I mean, what about, I guess just examples, we're considering policy changes. Would that be a routine item? I think it's, when you start adding,
I wouldn't, anything policy change or new educational policy, I wouldn't call that routine.
right,
Anytime you're changing a policy, that's not routine. Because it takes, where are we now with that? Does it take 2 votes or 1 vote?
We changed it.
We changed it, right?
We changed it to 2 votes for
For every,
you,
At the
one
full.
for,
we reversed it, right?
yeah, we were.
2 at the full and 1
Mhm, we
for
reversed it.
for new policy takes 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, we reversed it.
But I think changing a policy is not a routine item.
sure. Well, okay, maybe that was a bad example, but yes, once you start adding terms like that in there, then we might know what that means now. But next year, there's different committee members that, there's different interpretations when you read the policy like that. I mean, even with this policy right now, there's nothing in here about a subcommittee, but the interpretation was these rules apply to subcommittees as well as full committee.
Right.
Meeting over?
Oh, no, not yet.
Okay, good to see you guys.
Good to
Yep.
see you.
Welcome to Putnam, always.
Thank you.
Welcome, my math teacher,
Oh, nice.
Mr. Mayor, well, I want to shake hands with him.
He's,
Oh, he left.
he left a
Like-
long time ago.
Okay, no.
Sorry. All right,
Okay, so do we have
A motion.
a
to
motion?
adjourn?
Yes.
so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, roll call. Clerk?
Ms. Monroe Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.